Howdy, everybody. It's Thursday night, October 24th, 2024. It's 9 p.m. on the east coast of the United States, 6 p.m. on the west coast, 8 a.m. in Singapore, 12 noon in Sydney, and here where I'm sitting in northeast Minneapolis, it's 8 p.m. Central Daylight Time, and I am Jim Peters, and welcome to another edition of Jim Peters at Night. This is episode number 169, if you're keeping score at home. Our guest tonight is Jackie Dorothy. She's a reporter for the Cowboy State Daily of Wyoming. I got to ask her about this. I actually tried to find some information on this this publication. I understand it's very prominent in Wyoming. I think it's the most read website there, but I couldn't find a lot about it. We'll talk to her in a second. I got some terrible news. We're not on Blog Talk Radio again tonight, and this is getting really, really frustrating. I mean, at this point we were off of there about a quarter of the time, which means you can't call in, which means we're probably going to have a relatively short show because, no phone calls. I can prattle on. I'm good at that. If you listen to this before, but who wants to? It's not all about me, is it? No, it's about you. That's the idea. But you can't call in. Now, we are taking text messages at our text number, 408-458-5088. And if you have any questions for Dorothy during the interview, you can text them in and I will see them in real time. But no phone calls tonight. So Monday, we have Terry Christoph coming on. She's with the Red State. She's a reporter of the Red State. We're going to ask her about all sorts of stuff, the election, all that sort of stuff, all that crap. Thursday night next week, we're going to have another special Halloween episode like we did last year. And this is the type of thing where it's probably really good that you watch this on Rumble or YouTube instead of just listening to it, because we had a panel last year, and the guys got dressed up. We had a good time. It was fun. It was one of our most watched episodes too. So yeah, we're doing that on Thursday. Tuesday and Wednesday nights we don't have a clue yet, but I'll have something. We always got something. So Jackie's going to be coming on in just a second, and in the meantime, here's some words from Conk News. Stay tuned. Hi all, I want to talk to you about Conk News. You've probably heard me talk about this before, but if you're a news junkie, you should try this out. Conk News is a news aggregator. Now, there are plenty of news aggregators on the web, but Conk News is different than all the rest, and here's how. Most other news aggregators will lump the top stories from each news source under that news source. The top 10 stories, like, for example, from Fox News, Breitbart, the New York Post, etc. What Conk News does is it sends its servers out onto the web to over 75 different news sources every 3 hours. And yes, this is an automated process, but in this case, that's actually a good thing. And collects the latest stories from said 75 sources and then lays them out on its own front page in the order they were posted, regardless of the source. So you see the latest stories at the top of the front page, regardless of where they're from. And this is all free to you. You don't need to log in. You don't need to subscribe, register, nothing. It's completely free. All you have to do is go to conk.com to check it out. That's conk.com, 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 Conk News. Jackie Dorothy, are you there? Hello?
I am. Hello.
The intertube works. My God. I'm a computer programmer. It's amazing any of this stuff works at all. I just find it, I know how it works. I still find it just incredible. Packets flying all over everything. You're in Wyoming right now, I assume, right?
I am in Thermopolis, Wyoming, of all places.
Now,
right there in the rural Wyoming.
Okay, because the only two cities I know of, for all practical purposes, in Wyoming are Casper and Cheyenne, and they are basically, relatively speaking, the two major cities, right?
That is very true, yes.
Does Cowboy State Daily have a physical location?
It does. We have an office in Cheyenne, and that's where the majority, where our editors are. but so much of it's done virtually anymore. Like you were saying, amazing computers.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so we just zoom in for our meetings.
and that's the reason I ask is because I tried to. There's nowhere on your website that actually says where you're located, and I tried to find out, I couldn't. So I thought maybe the entire thing was virtual. I thought, but
It pretty much is, but we have an official office. I've just never been there.
oh, that's interesting. Okay, so Thermopolis is kind of in the middle of the state, right?
Yes.
And I,
And the name itself just means hot city because we have the world's largest hot springs.
oh, oh, and from the email you sent me, you're a seventh generation Wyomingite, huh?
Yes.
That's pretty amazing.
That's on my dad's side, and it is. It really is something to be proud of.
Yeah. So, when did how far back does that go? Like the early 1800s, earlier?
Yes, it goes into about 1840, I believe it is, where we tracked down our family, and that's when they first showed up on the reservation here. That's my Arapaho side, and my dad's Northern Arapaho, Eastern Shoshone, and a bunch of other stuff.
Have you ever lived anywhere
But
else?
I have. My mom is Alaskan, and so I've spent a lot of time up in Alaska, especially my childhood. So back and forth between Alaska and Wyoming.
That's pretty amazing. That the two least populated states in the union.
Yeah,
No,
so true.
I'm kind of fascinated by this. Well, I'm not kind of. I'm very fascinated. First of all, my wife's family, she has an enormous family, and they live in northern Wisconsin, and we jokingly refer to them as Wisconsin hillbillies. But it's not pretty. It's pretty sparsely populated up there too, and we spend a lot of time. And I'm also from a small town myself, so it's kind of I have a feel for how this works in the state, but I've never actually been there. Um, what
Well, you should change that and come visit.
I
It
should.
really is a beautiful state,
I know.
and it has a lot to offer.
Yeah, well, and then of course you have Yellowstone. You can't
Yes.
bitch about that. I mean, that's pretty incredible. Have you know? There seems to be a trend in the United States of people moving out of big cities because now that you can work virtually, it's like people kind of choose their location, and more people are choosing to live outside of the large metros because you don't have to. I mean, is the population in Wyoming growing right now a lot or a little or
It's rather funny. It isn't actually.
huh?
You would think it would be, but it's
Yeah,
been kind of, I think we've seen a dip. It might be a little stagnant and it might be going back up, but we have quite a ways to grow. And but what you're saying about people working virtually, I think our Cowboy State Daily is a perfect example of it. We have reporters scattered all across the state, and we don't have to be in a centralized office
yeah.
and still get our job done.
Is this publication pretty much the main news source for the state right now? I mean, I was pretty impressed. You guys have a lot of reporters.
We have definitely grown it fast. I just joined in July, and it's been amazing just in the few months I've been there to see it grow.
Where did you
And
work?
it has become before.
Yeah, where did you work before
I've
that?
been a freelancer, and I worked at Thermopolis as a tourism director, and before that for the tribe as a marketing director.
How big is Thermopolis?
About 3,000 people in
Oh,
the town,
okay.
give or take.
Yeah. And
Very small community.
what reservation is there?
Wind River Indian Reservation.
And
It's it's the third largest in the United States.
so when you say 3,000 people, does that include the people on the reservation or not?
Nope, that's just
How
Thermopolis.
big is the reservation?
Uh, it's the size of Yellowstone National Park.
Holy Jesus. Wow.
That's the best comparison I can give.
That's incredible. Well, I ran into you on the intertube because we do a lot of stuff on the paranormal stuff on the show, and you write a series called Haunted Wyoming, which I ran into story, and then I realized you wrote a whole bunch of them. It's a regular thing for you, and so I wanted to run by some of these. I wanted you to talk about some of these stories you've written. The first one being the headline is "Lost Hunter Saved by Ghost Boy and Bighorn Mountains." What's going on there?
So we have the Bighorn Mountains, and to place you there, it's a very, you're talking about Wyoming is a rural place. You can walk for miles and never see anybody.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And s- right. And so you have the Bighorn Mountains. It's full of a lot of canyons. This particular section's on Trapper Creek outside of a very small town of Graybull and uh, Matterson up there. And so what happened is in 1951, this young hunter got lost. He was only walking 2 miles to their camp, walked down a canyon, and he was supposed to cross another one, but a thick fog had rolled in, which happens in that area. A blizzard. He was so disoriented and he was doing the wrong things. He knew to stop, build a fire, no longer walk, but he kept walking. He was panicked and he said the terrain got rougher and rougher. And all of a sudden, the fog parted, and there was this boy in a red flannel shirt pointing, go this way. So then the fog parted again. The boy disappeared. He went the direction he was told to go, and he got to the road, got to his camp, and got to safety.
Huh.
So that, and what gave me the goosebumps about this story is I'm a historian by trade.
Yeah.
And so I love to research. I mean, you know how tedious that can get.
Say again.
So
What was
I
that?
think
I didn't catch that last
I
thing.
oh, about researching
Oh yeah.
how
Uh-huh.
tedious it can get. And I was just determined that there had to be some kind of connection because this boy in the red flannel shirt actually has a report of that night he showed up to another guy and saved another hunter. And the year before he had saved a sheep herder. And so it's like, who is he? Then I found the story of Dylan McKinnon. This kid was 17 years old, and in 1932, same thing happened. Fog, blizzard. Unfortunately, Dylan perished in that storm. And 19 years later, is it him that was showing up? That's the question.
Wow, that's amazing. And the thing about the story, and not to get off the kind of the ghostly aspect of it, but the problem, if you want to call it a problem with where you live in sparsely populated areas, is
Hmm.
that a simple trip, like a mile on foot, can be fraught with danger, even if you've done it over and over again. I mean, it's like simple, ordinary, daily things. If things, a little thing goes wrong, and then all of a sudden you're kind of screwed.
No, you were exactly right because both these teenagers were mountaineers. They had grown up in in the Bighorns. They knew Trapper Creek, and yet both of them ended up getting terribly lost.
Uh-huh. I have as a
So
little aside, you're talking about sparsely populated areas, and how how do you think do you have any theories? I mean, I do, but I'm curious to see what you have to say. Do you have any theories about how that affects the mentality of the people living around there when your neighbor's 2 miles away, and you could go days without seeing anybody? It makes you think differently, doesn't it?
I think so, but you know, I love it myself personally because we do live where our nearest neighbor's like 5 miles away.
Yeah.
But we do live in this day and age where, we just travel to work and put the miles on our vehicle.
Right. Well, in some ways,
So
it's a best of both worlds, isn't it? Because yeah, years
it
ago
is.
you'd be isolated, but now you're physically
Hmm.
isolated, but you're not really necessarily socially isolated. You know. And the other thing I've noticed,
Exactly.
I was talking about my relatives up in northern Wisconsin. So I live in Minneapolis, is 15th largest city in the United States. I was looking at some statistics. There's 560,000 people in the state of Wyoming, and honest to God, Jackie, that's almost the number of people in my neighborhood. But the thing but
Yes.
what I've noticed going up north is that, um, okay, so it takes me. I have to basically put aside a half an hour to drive anywhere, even like 1 mile away, just because of traffic. And up there, you can drive. If you drive a half an hour, you might drive 25, 30 miles, but it still takes the same amount of time. And so, in some strange way, I mean, I'm curious if this is true where you're living. In some strange way, you have your own little metropolis because it doesn't take you any longer to get to where you're going than it takes me to get because of different circumstances. So things are way more spread out, but you still have resources. I mean, do you know what I'm talking about?
I do because I think about that when I go to Denver and get caught in traffic and it takes forever to get just a mile.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I could walk that mile faster than driving it.
That's terrible. I know. No, one of my big relatives up there lives 5 miles away from an Indian reservation himself, and his wife works on the reservation, and yeah, they regularly walk the 5 miles from their house to the Indian reservation. You know, it's like it's not that big a deal. It's not a high traffic or anything. You have to worry about the highway traffic. You know, you're walking on the side of the road, but I just find this. I don't know though. There's the mentality, and it's partly because of the internet. The mentality about living in sparsely populated areas is rapidly changing, and I just find it kind of fascinating. Yeah, just
We
freaking.
are definitely, especially with stuff like Starlink. I mean, that's changed everything, even in our newsroom. They can tell when I'm on HughesNet or if I've switched to my Starlink.
Uh huh.
It's such a difference and such a speed. And it makes it possible to live anywhere in the state and still work.
Yeah.
Places that, I mean, where we live, don't even have cell phone service, but we still have internet.
Yeah, that's amazing too. Where my relatives live, they have cell phone service, but it's really bad. You can't count on it. Half the time, you don't get a signal. You know.
Yes, that's why I'm not calling from my house. We drove to town to call you.
Yeah. Well, hey, let's talk about another story here. You wrote a story
Okay.
about Kerwin, Wyoming, which is a ghost town. Tell us about that.
Yes. I loved this story because it's been told so often, but I found an article that was written in 1921. So the story of Kerwin is that it was a mining town. It had a rich vein of gold, silver, copper, and we had a lot of people from back east that were investing bunches of money. I mean, just to give an example, in 1900, all of these homes in the middle of a you talk about rural, it was 75 miles from Cody, Wyoming. I mean, it was very isolated. This town of Kerwin, every house had electricity because they spent $15,000 to put up an electric plant.
And fifteen
And
thousand
so,
dollars in 1900 was a fortune.
yes. So that was just one small piece of it. They had all these materials, they were bringing in equipment. There was talk of building the railroad all the way up to this tiny town, and it was growing. It was about 200 people. And then this avalanche happened, killed three people, and scared everybody. But the reporter said that's not enough to chase off Wyoming people. That was not. There
Well,
was something else that happened.
well, there must have been because it was also just the money. You know, if you're looking at
Yes,
gold in the
they
ground.
left everything. Yep. And he went up there himself and found gold still there in the tunnels. He said, "What happened? What really happened?" He didn't say anything about ghosts or anything, but I myself have even been there, and there is a presence. You hear voices, you feel stuff when you're up there.
Man,
And so when
I'm looking at a
I
picture.
tell you,
The picture you published with your article. This place is small.
it is very small. You can only get to it now on with four-wheel drive, four-wheelers. I mean, it's off-roading because you have to cross creeks. If you Google it and see it, and what's really cool is they've gone through there. There's about 30 buildings that were remaining out of this whole town,
Uh huh.
and the state has put in roofs and they preserved it, and you can actually go up to this ghost town and walk around and experience what it was like back in the 1900s before it was abandoned.
So did you ever find out, or did anybody ever really say why it was abandoned? Was there any definitive conclusion?
No, that's what he said. He said there was always rumors like, well, the railroad wasn't coming. It was coming. Well, it was. I was thinking as like the big stakeholders chased out the small stakeholders. Well, why didn't they stay? I mean, that's one of the things that O'Donoghue was saying in 1920, which was only about 10 years, 15 years after it was abandoned, is that there wasn't any reason for it to be. Something strange happened there. And anyone who visits it today, especially if you're attuned to that kind of thing, you can hear the voices, you can feel something is there.
Wow. Is the
And those
mi
are the stories we've had.
does the mind still exist in any form?
No, that's what he was saying is they've all been closed. And
It's hard to imagine people, especially, men, walking away from gold, literally sitting in a mine, you know what I mean?
yes, it's like what really chased him. I mean, this is the all the aspects for a horror movie. It's
Yeah,
just
or at the
it,
very least, a
it
documentary.
yeah, there have been small ones that are done. You can look on YouTube and you can come across the stories that people have gone up there, mostly ghost hunters, but I think it really does deserve to have a full story done, especially using O'Donoghue's article
Uh-huh.
and what he said as somebody that was there and someone that's confused about why no one stayed.
So I'm gonna get a little off topic here. I hope you don't you're talking about documentaries on
Yep,
YouTube,
go
made me
for
think
it.
of this. So, what's the Bigfoot situation like around where you live? Do you see any?
Oh, I have seen the coolest thing ever. So I personally have not seen a Bigfoot, but when I was a reporter back in 2006, I was out on the reservation and I was doing a boring story on a water tower. So this couple of guys stopped and they said, "What are you doing?" And I was like really bored about this story. So I told them I was there to document Bigfoot. They looked at each other and said, "Oh, so you know." And they started telling me about a family of Bigfoot that lived in the on the Wind River Range, right there, about 20 miles from where I was standing.
Uh-huh. You know.
And yes,
Did you ever
they
hear any more
started sharing
did
all these stories.
did you ever hear any more about it?
Yes, they said that somebody had a picture. I never was able to connect with that one, but we have people that have spotted it from a biologist all the way to now. This is what was really cool: is there's a petroglyph. It's on private property, but there was a petroglyph I was shown of a giant footprint of a just a giant foot, just like
Uh-huh.
you see for Bigfoot.
Yeah.
So here they do believe about him. And in fact, we're pursuing stories about Bigfoot. I found another one and I will be writing this story soon. Chugwater, which is a town outside of Cheyenne. They had, and this is funny, a big hairy man is living in the mountains. We can't catch him. We can't shoot him. And they were getting mad because it wasn't like he was doing anything, but they could spot him. And a circus, I mean, this is the 1920s, right?
Uh-huh.
But a circus went out there and they were trying to capture this guy to bring and put in their circus as entertainment for people, but they could never catch him.
It isn't it way this animal is pretty damn smart. It's really good at staying away from people, and I have a hard time I have a friend of mine is an actual Bigfoot investigator. He works for the Bigfoot Field Research Organization. Matter of fact, he was on the show last Monday night, Larry Newman. And I was
Oh, okay.
Larry and I were talking. Uh, so I've been doing this for a long time, this radio stuff, and 10 years ago, my claim to fame is that for 30 years I've been saying that UFOs are real, and the government finally admitted it. So everyone's, oh my God, how did you know? And it's like, well, I know because there's an enormous amount of evidence. It wasn't any gut feeling or anything. But when I was telling Larry and I were talking about the fact that 10 years ago, if you told people you said that, well, they talked about aliens and Bigfoot, they'd say, well, Bigfoot's real, but the aliens maybe not. Now it's the opposite. Now people buy the aliens, but they don't buy Bigfoot. I'm thinking, well, it's just a gorilla. Why? And I don't know if you know this, Jackie, but the giant squid was rumored for 2,000 years, and they didn't catch one until
Mm.
2006. So I mean,
And
go ahead.
those are real. And well, when you were talking about UFOs, to go back to that, here in Thermopolis in the 60s, there was two sightings of UFOs. And I know both of these men. They're very sensible, very straight and narrow guys. And they both just say, yeah, we saw UFOs. That's what was floating in the skies. We saw them very clearly.
Well, them and
So
300,000 other people, especially,
exactly.
and I don't have to tell you this, UFOs have a tendency to hang out in sparsely populated areas, so that wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, I think you'll probably almost be ground zero. All right, I have another story here, and we didn't put this on the list, but I have to ask you about this because I'm really curious
Okay.
about the Chugwater restaurant. What is
Oh, I'm
going on
glad you
there?
asked.
What is that
This
about?
is like the creepiest story.
Yeah.
So it's actually, when I first heard about this story, I actually had my husband take me down to chug water because I wanted to see it. I wanted to see where this happened.
And how
It's
far
a
is that
very
from
small
you?
town,
How far is it from
um,
Thermopolis?
about 4 hours
Uh-huh.
driving straight.
And
So
how
I
big is
forget.
it?
It's right outside of Cheyenne. It's a very small town.
Okay.
In fact, when I called them, they were excited to have the story be shared because they want people to know about this. It's a time slip. It makes sense. This couple and another man, an airman, stopped at the Chugwater during a blizzard. They wanted to get out of the weather. They were grateful there was a restaurant open, went in, and it was so mundane. I think that's what really captures your imagination. And they're sitting there eating steak. And the only thing that was surprising about the whole thing was it was $9 for all three of them with their beer and their steak and their chicken. And so they tipped the waitress $5. And she was so grateful and just told them to be careful out there. And then a week later, he drives back to bring his wife there, and the restaurant is gone.
Oh,
And
Jesus.
it's just, there's no restaurant.
That's crazy.
And he said if it was just him, he would never have said anything, but the other couple were adamant. Oh, yes, we ate here. This is where we were. They parked in the same spot, everything, wandered around, finally found an old guy that said, yeah, that restaurant burned down like years ago. And then
They went
again,
into a ghost restaurant and ate dinner.
yes.
Oh my
I
God.
mean, it wasn't anything big or nothing. I mean, it wasn't like weird things were happening. They just had a meal.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was it.
And you're right. The only weird thing is, yeah, $9 is pretty cheap, but it'd probably be expensive in 1900, So,
Right. Well, I found an article. There was a restaurant that burned down in 1920s, which would have been about 30 some years before they stopped there.
uh,
And it was in the same area that they described where they were going to go eat.
so I'm just
So we
curious.
found actual documents.
This couple, was the building still there, but there's no restaurant, or was there nothing there at all?
Nothing there at
Oh
all. At
man.
that point, in 1952, I believe story was, it was a blank lot,
Wow.
empty lot.
That is just that's incredible. Y- You can't make stuff like that up.
No.
I don't think you
A
can.
lot of these stories, you can actually, this author here, Debbie Munn, it's Munn. She wrote a Wyoming ghost stories, and you can get it on Amazon. So if
Oh,
you want to read more of those
actually, I
stories,
do.
but
I will pick that up.
yes,
Thank you. Thanks for
yes,
what's her name
she's
again?
done a great job. Her name is Deb Munn,
Deb
and
Munn.
I will
Okay.
send that to you, the link.
All right. Yeah. When I never mentioned this to you in my emails, but we're gonna put a link up to all these stories and your work and stuff on our show blog too. So we'll do that.
Oh, thank you.
So
Appreciate it.
of course, people associate Wyoming with cowboys, and
Yes,
first of all, there are still real cowboys, right?
yes.
Yeah.
Still riding horses, still going out there. I had the privilege just a couple weeks ago. We have what's called the Cowboy Hall of Fame. And so we induct anybody into there that meets the requirements of being 45 years or longer in the saddle. And it's just amazing group of people. And they had this section called Coffee with the Cowboys. And we sat there and listened to all these stories being told by these old timers that had just spent their lifetime in the saddle. And it's awesome to know that that way of life is still here and still exists. And they're looking for people to come who are willing to work. There's still jobs available for those that want to live that lifestyle.
And so I'm asking a really stupid question as an urban man. Forgive me, but the idea is you're herding cattle, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the majority of what you're doing. And even in this day, it's like they were talking about it. They love their four wheelers for the short stints, but when you go up into the mountains, the bighorns that we were talking about, there's areas you cannot reach with vehicles, and you still have to go.
Yeah.
One of my best friends has a ranch out here, and that's what her family does. Is that, in fact, Roundup just ended about a week or two ago for her, so she's finally able to be at home.
And a ranch
after
like
spending all
a
that
ranch
time.
like that, how many head of cattle are we talking about? Thousands?
Uh, Sometimes as little as 100, other times you do have thousands of cattle that you're rounding up, depending on how big the ranch is.
I understand the attraction to that for a certain type of person. I understand that would like I can for some a certain type of person that would be like a perfect job, you know?
Yes.
Because you don't really I mean, you know, you have a boss, but, you know, not really kinda you're really out there the vast majority of your time by yourself or with a couple buddies or something, you know? It's like and it's physical and you're in the sun, and I don't know, I could see why people would like that. I really I could
And the rodeo also is alive and well here too. So there's a lot of action that way as well.
is there I know that there's professional rodeo, I know that. Is that what you're talking
Hmm.
about, or is it kind of just like
Yep.
amateur? Oh, cool. Very cool.
Yeah, like in Cody, Wyoming, which is at the gate of Yellowstone, one of the gates, not Jackson, but the other gate. They have a rodeo every single weekend during the summer.
Huh. That's pretty neat. You're right, I think I might have to visit. Well,
Absolutely.
and while we're
And
talking
Cheyenne
about
Frontier Days is really good too.
say again, what was that?
Cheyenne Frontier Days, that's where they call them the daddy of them all. That's where the real big rodeo is.
Oh, that's very interesting. Huh. So, speaking while we're on the subject of cattle, and you wanted to end with this, or maybe I wanted to end with it,
You
about
did?
the fact that the federal government has put out new guidelines for eating for America, or they're thinking about it, or and apparently they've decided that beef is bad. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about this is because this stuff really pisses me off. I mean, that everything you mentioned in your article is absolutely correct, and that is the fact that the beef is a fantastic source of protein. It's you know loaded with certain vitamins and minerals that it's difficult to get anywhere else. And I think they want me to eat bugs, and I refuse. I like my steak. I really do.
Beans and lentils, that's
Oh
what they're
yeah,
saying.
yeah. Tell me about it. It's like go to hell.
Go
Yeah.
eat a veggie burger.
Yeah, right, right. And you know what's really terrible, Jackie? Is and I'm laughing now. Is this stuff about like the impossible meat, the impossible burgers? I don't know if you ever
Yes.
you watch South Park, you know, the cartoon show, you know, with the with the little kids, and one of them says, you know, all my life they've been telling me not to eat processed food, and now they're selling me processed food. I mean, you know, it's really they're pushing. Oh, it has no meat in it. Yeah, but it's crap. You know, it's you could.
Well,
Yeah, go
when
ahead.
you when I wanted to make sure it was a balanced story, so I went to Harvard's site because that's where it's like, okay, beef is bad for you. Tell me why. And it comes down to, well, it's processed and all the chemicals. And it's like, so you're talking about deli meat versus beef.
Yeah, that's
You're,
right.
it's and you're lumping the two together.
I thought the exact
It's
same thing
not
when
the same
when I
thing.
read your piece. They're talking about deli meat, and yeah, deli meat's processed. And you know, I'm of Italian Romanian descent, and so I have to admit I love my submarine sandwich. I love my and I know it's not the best thing for me, but I've had generations of relatives who've been eating that stuff, and it hasn't killed them. Matter of fact, my people in my family live forever. So I don't know about that either, but I know that yeah, there's maybe chemicals in that stuff, but yeah, you're talking about regular and personally myself at this point, I mean, I loved hamburgers in my youth and it's kind of still do a little bit, but really now I really want a piece I want a steak. I want a piece of real meat. I don't really I don't I just I don't know. Now you see you got me flustered. It's like this is
You're
this
thinking of steak. Don't take my steak.
no take my
I
steak. I
actually
know. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was trying to talk the editors into using a picture of someone eating steak, and they didn't. They ended up using just a grocery shop because they said we don't use stock footage, we don't use stock photos in any of our pictures. We
Well,
use the
if
real
you ever want to
stuff. So
run another article on this and you want that picture, I'll send it to you. Okay, I'll shoot it myself.
that'd be great. I no, that's what I told them. It's like, well, I would have gone and posed for that.
Yeah,
I'll
really.
sacrifice myself and go eat a steak.
How can anybody complain? I look at this to me. It's just I don't the the guy who runs the beef association was talking about the politicization of this, and it's not so much the fact doesn't have anything to do with health as much as I think it's like people wanted to control people. You know, it's like, well, no,
Right.
we've decided this is bad, so now you're not going to be able to do this anymore. You know, And why? I don't. I just bothers me to no end. I don't know what to tell you.
Right. He sees it as a three-pronged attack. They're just looking for any way to get in to
Yeah.
destroy the beef industry.
Right. Right. And then not to mention, yeah, then there's all the thousands of people that work on this. It's
Hmm.
that is well, that's a I was gonna say I'll just say it. It's kind of the same thing with the oil industry too. All right, I understand
Yeah.
oil is dirty and it's primitive and all that sort of stuff. But millions of people in America work on this. If you get rid of this tomorrow or even in 5 years, you're talking about half the country being out of work. It's like, and not to mention the fact that I do not buy, and I don't think there's any science that says we're running out of oil. I mean, that's just BS.
No.
No,
Actually, that was a really interesting thing. Is there is a guy here. He's the one that Thermopolis is also known for our dinosaurs. He discovered dinosaurs in Thermopolis, but he is a geologist. He told me oil is still being produced and created. It's not created from the dinosaur bones. It's created in under the sea from all these clams.
yeah,
And as and he described the process, and it's like, so we're being sold a lie.
yeah.
There is no way to run out of oil.
I've
And
heard of
that's
that too.
exactly what he
Oh,
told
well, we
us.
might, we might run
Yep.
out of oil in like 10 million years, you
Right.
know, but no, not anytime soon. Not at all. No, you're right. It is a lie. It's just BS. But it bothers the crap out of me. It's like people are pushing this stuff, and it's astonishing. I have to. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I do a lot of stuff on the show because I'm basically what people call a climate change denier, and that's because I know about science and the fact. So here's the deal, and I've said this a million times. I have a whole bunch of scientists on the show regularly. The world is warming up. There's no doubt about that. I don't know anybody who doubts that. My Patrick Moore, the climatologist, he said the world's been warming up for 300 years. But the smoking gun in that statement is that for the first half of those 300 years, there was no industrialization on the planet. The world is warming up, but humans aren't causing it. So, you know,
Well, you're talking to a former Alaskan as well. And so up in Alaska, I grew up knowing that here we are in one of the coldest states, but it used to be a jungle. And
yeah,
we would
yes,
find fossils and evidence that it used to be hot and steamy up there.
right. That's right. That's absolutely correct. And the other thing is, you're talking about that the comparison to beef. Um, oh, geez, I lost my train of thought. This is terrible. What was I going to say? Oh man,
Well, you started on the oil because they're under attack. So the beef is under attack now.
yeah.
But the all the theories they come up with against the cattle, I don't see it being scientific.
Oh, I know what I was
It
going to
is.
say. I know what I was going to say. Speaking of the cattle, and this other thing about methane and cows farting, that's BS too. That's just BS. And I don't know if you know this, but the people talking about the carbon. Carbon is actually a good thing. Carbon dioxide is, and we're almost at a low point in Earth's history for the lowest amount of carbon we've ever had. It's the whole thing is completely screwed up, and they're selling this, and they relentlessly pound it into people's heads, and people believe it. And if I
It's funny you mentioned that though, because one of the ranchers I spoke to, Dennis' son, he went on to this after we were done with the interview. He gave me a whole explanation of how cattle actually done right when they're grazing correctly, the carbon they're putting back in the earth is what we need.
That's correct.
And
That's
he says they're
absolutely right.
helping it.
That's right.
He says
I
it makes it greener, it makes it healthier.
Yes, he's absolutely. That's absolutely correct. I mean, I'm glad he brought that up. I should have that guy on. I'm gonna get his telephone number from you later on. Like,
Oh, I will definitely. Dennis' son is an awesome guy. He does the Wyoming Livestock Roundup, a
uh huh.
weekly rancher magazine. He would be a great interview for you.
Oh, that's fantastic. I appreciate that. We'll talk about that later. Jackie,
Okay.
I can't thank you enough. This has been fantastic.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. I
Yeah,
really
so
appreciate
we'll
it as
put
well.
we'll put links up to all these stories you have on our show blog, and also just your regular author page on Cowboy State Daily too. And I hope we can do this again sometime. I'm gonna I'm gonna
Good.
regularly check in, and when you got a couple haunted Wyoming stories, when you have a few new ones, I will probably call you back. So okay.
Well, I just found out about a ghost tour I want to do that is about Christmas past. So we might have to be in touch about that one.
Oh, maybe that's right. That's like December. It's coming up.
Yes.
And the election. We're
Oh,
and we
yes.
get to elect Santa Claus. Thanks, Jackie.
Oh,
I really appreciate it.
all right.
We'll
Thank
talk
you.
to you soon. You take care, all right? Bye-bye.
You as well. Bye.
That's Jackie Dorothy, reporter for Cowboy State Daily. That's kind of so okay. So I want to get back to this. So I just find this amazing. So these two couples drive into this little town and they go to a restaurant. They sit down and they have a steak dinner, and they tip the waitress $5, which she thinks is just amazing. And they leave, and then what? 5 years later, or something like that, 2 3 years later, they come back and the restaurant is no. I think it was like a few weeks later they came back and the restaurant isn't there. It doesn't exist. They ate in a restaurant that doesn't exist. How does that happen? Oh my God. All right. Well, I guess we're gonna have part two tonight. We're not gonna take any phone calls, but here's a commercial. Hi all, Jim Peters again for Conk News. Let me tell you one of the greatest things about Conk News. It's free. It's completely and totally free. You don't need to register, you don't need to log in, subscribe, none of that stuff. Sure, they run a few ads on the front page, but if you're an old fogey like me, you might actually appreciate this because when you check out Conk News at conk.com, you'll probably notice that it's the closest thing to an old fashioned hard copy newspaper that you'll find online. The latest up to the minute news from 75 high quality sources collected every 3 hours, all laid out with photos and headlines directly from the articles. And when you click on a story, you go directly to that story. No ad page, no interstitial page, none of that stuff. This is the way online news is meant to be. And did I mention that it's completely free? Seriously, how much of stuff in America is free now, right? That's of quality anyway. So check this out for yourself. It's at conk.com, CONK.com. Conk News. I got to push a button. Part two of Jim Peters at Night. I'm Jim Peters. And we're not taking your phone calls tonight because Blog Talk Radio is down yet again. This is not good. We've been talking about replacing it for some time. And I don't know. I'm actually really quite pissed off about this. I mean, at this point, it's been off about one every 4 days we do. So I'm going to make this relatively short, but I do have a couple of things here I thought you'd find of interest. So, if you have an Alexa box, for in fact, I have one here right on my desk, and I forgot to turn it off because every once in a while Alexa decides to talk. So let me do that now. If you have an Alexa box, you might have heard about this, about the fact that if you ask Alexa about what the question, why should I vote for Donald Trump or why should I vote for Kamala Harris? Uh, if you ask about Trump, Alexa would say, "Well, I can't talk about the election." If you ask about Harris, Alexa will go on and on how wonderful Kamala Harris is. I mean, and it's clearly biased. Now, the people at Amazon have said, okay, the reason this happened is because they put in a filter. They were in the process of installing filters, and they put the filter in for Trump first and not for Harris. But here's the amazing thing. So this is since July 1st, from July 1st to September 1st, if I'm right, or September 15th, the number of requests they got for that question for Kamala Harris was 225. The number of requests they got for that question for Donald Trump was 14,000. No lie. That's so apparently they're saying that because of that, because they were overwhelmed with questions about Trump, they put the filter in for Trump first. That's what they're saying. I think it's kind of BS. I think they're just covering their butt, but whatever. I don't know if you saw um, Kamala Harris on CNN last night. Uh, she got dreadful reviews. Now I didn't watch this. I'm tired of watching this stuff. I I mean, I'm a Trump supporter, but even still, I'm tired. And Trump is amazingly entertaining. But still, I don't really watch anymore. It's like I got better things to do, and I know pretty much know what he's going to say. But uh, the headline from Dwayne Patterson in Hot Air, and Hot Air is like one of our go-to sources. We have people on from Hot Air all the time. The headline is Kamala Harris sets for new personal best for worst media appearance ever. And it wasn't just the conservatives writing about this. The panel on CNN basically trashed her. I mean, it's even the left wing media trashed this appearance. Apparently, it was just awful. And so I didn't. I like I said, I didn't watch it. I can't speak from firsthand. But all these sources, especially when you know you have left leaning sources that are trashing it, it it has to be it was apparently really bad. And of course we're 12 days away from the election. That's a great thing to do, if you want to be president of the United States. That's a fantastic thing. And in the meantime, and I probably don't have to tell you this, Trump's favor in the polling, Trump's favorability has gone up and Harris's has gone down. Trump, for the first time ever, is polling over 50% favorable for the first time since he started his political career. He is now approved by more of the people in the United States than disapproved. And considering all this crap that's been thrown at him, that's pretty amazing. I have some UFO news here too. This is pretty stark, pretty shocking here. We'll see. I don't know if this is true or not. Uh, a guy named Simon Holland, who is a filmmaker for NASA, he is claiming, and this came out on the news today. Although if you only follow the UFO news, if you don't follow the UFO news, it wasn't in the mainstream news. Excuse me. He's claiming that NASA now has evidence, strong evidence, to indicate that they have found intelligent life on another planet. And they did it with a telescope, with radio telescopes. And the planet is circling Proximita Proximita Centauri, which is the closest star to Earth and to our sun, 4.5 light years away. And they said that not only do they are they seeing evidence on the planet of actual civilization, like through a telescope, but they're also picking up very specific radio signals from there. And these and that's particularly interesting because most, even the stuff like SETI gets and stuff like that, there's usually these like nebulous background signals that are all over the frequency spectrum. These are very specific frequency specific signals, like a radio station would put out. And so and he said that NASA, his understanding is that NASA already has enough evidence to confirm the fact that this is real, but they don't want to announce it yet. So, and I'll be honest with you, I don't think they will. Even if this is true, I don't think they'd announce it. I think there's too much going on. It's just, I still think there's a large section of the military at the Pentagon who thinks that the public will go nuts if people find out there's actual intelligent life on other planets. I really do. And they supposedly internally they've been debating this for years. They've been going back and forth about whether they should tell the public or not. They've been hiding it, and in many instances, most instances, in hiding it, they're breaking the law. And so people are wanting to cover their butt. And so I do not think they will announce this, even if it's true. And that's really terrible because yeah. So but I don't know. Meanwhile, a guy in the UK, a guy at a university, and I can't remember his name, I didn't write it down. He's put out a paper saying that belief in aliens, the level of belief in aliens that's overwhelming society right now is dangerous to society. That's what he says. And he says that uh, conversely to the guy at NASA, he says, well, we have absolutely no evidence that that extraterrestrials exist. And so therefore we shouldn't be talking about this that much. And I would say he's nuts because here's the deal: we may not have proof, but we have a boatload of evidence. That's not a problem. We have evidence coming out our rear ends. So and then the other thing is gets on around to what constitutes evidence. People they want data. No, here's what constitutes data evidence. Your uncle Charlie saw an alien in the forest. saw an extraterrestrial, walking around in and saw find saucer land. Now, you may not believe that, and I don't know if even if I believe it too, but like, how many people have said this? 300,000? For I mean, we were talking about Larry Newman, Jackie, Dorothy, and I was talking about my friend Larry Newman, who works for the Bigfoot Real Research Organization. So he was on last Monday, and you can listen to that show if you want. And they get credible sightings of Bigfoot. The Bigfoot Real Field Research Organization gets about, well, they publish half of them a month, half a dozen of them. And these are what they call their Class A or Class B sightings, so the best ones. But Larry says they don't even publish all the Class A or B sightings. They get more than that. And then you think about this: the 90% of the people who see a Bigfoot never report it to anybody. You know, so the question is, at what point, like, I have a friend of mine who says everybody's lying. He says, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people in the United States who say they've seen UFOs, and tens of thousands of people who said they've actually seen aliens. And my friend says every single one of them is lying. They're not. No, most of them might be lying, but the fact is, I mean, this is like the reverse thing of what Carl Sagan said years ago. Uh, Extraordinary claims need extraordinary proof, is what he said. That's not true. It's the opposite. If 10,000 people claim to have seen Bigfoot and all but one of them is lying, but one is telling the truth, and that means Bigfoot's real. That that's the thing. It's like if your Uncle Charlie says he ran into a flying saucer in the forest, and then there's uh, Travis Walton, who actually literally did run into a flying saucer in the forest, literally, and said it captured him and held him for 5 days. You know, so is he now? I don't know if you know anything about that story. He was on a logging crew. There were 7 of them total. Travis was the only one who left the truck and actually approached the UFO because he said he was a hotshot and he really wanted to see it. Okay, fine, and he did. And they got zapped with some light, and his party drove away in terror. And then came back because they decided, oh, holy shit, he might be dead. We should go find out. So they turned around and came back. By the time they came back, the UFO was gone, but they all saw it. Every single one of the people in that party has been given numerous lie detector tests, and they passed all of them. As a matter of fact, uh, Travis was on a television show, and I think it was in Australia a few years ago, and they said he took a lie detector test literally live on television. They said he failed it, and that was a lie. They lied just to get some attention. It turned out he actually passed that one, but they claimed to the audience that he failed it. That's your press for you, folks. That's what people do. So my point is, I you know, okay. So how many people that has that happened to? You know, is every one of them lying? Every single one? I don't know. I don't think so. And like, what constitutes proof? I get back to the question. It's like, no, do you want data? You want some data about flying machines, that sort of thing? No. How about your fact your Uncle Charlie saw one? And why doesn't that count? Well, because in and of itself, one single person reporting one single incident might be highly dubious. Oh, it is highly dubious because the vast majority of people say they see UFOs. It's just they're mistaken. I mean, we know this for a fact. The That's been proved. Everybody who's content, the MUFON, everyone who's ever compiled this data, 95% of the people who see UFOs are mistaken. They are not UFOs. They're something else. But the 5%? Well, and then you're talking about the fact that 5% every any particular year could be thousands of people. I don't know. And maybe I'll leave you with this. Neiman Marcus Christmas catalog's coming out. They've been doing it for 95 years. It's not a Christmas catalog anymore. It's a holiday catalog. They have taken the word Christmas out of the whole thing. The word Christmas does not appear in the catalog once, not once. And apparently, the people who work at Neiman Marcus, that work in the catalog department there, are just livid about this. They did this on the order of their higher ups, the CEO. and I can't remember the guy's name, but he's not getting particularly good reviews from not just from the staff, but from the company in general. I mean, a lot of people think he's basically dismantling it. But yeah, that catalog's gonna come out, and now it's called a holiday catalog. It's not a Christmas catalog because because Christmas is terrible. And then you got that Santa Claus guy, and he's flying his UFO around, and oh my God, Jesus! All right, folks, we're done for tonight. I'm sorry about the lack of calling. I really am. I like to take your phone calls, and that's kind of the way we've changed the format of the show. We do the interview the first half. We take phone calls in the second half, but you can't take phone calls when we don't have a telephone number that works. So I know we will address this Monday night. Terry Christoph from Red State is here now. I was saying we got a lot of people from Hot Air. Hot Air and Red State are part of the Salem Media Properties. There's 6 websites. Actually, they're called the Town Hall Media Properties. They're owned by Salem Media. There's 6 websites in the Town Hall Media universe, and Hot Air is one of them, and Red State's one of them. Jennifer Oliver O'Connell, she's on Red State. She comes on here regularly, and this is Terry Christoph, and I'm hoping to get suck some of those people here too. We regularly have 3 guys at Hot Air who come on the show regularly. So, and they're all just fantastic. That would be David Strom, Jazz Shaw, and Ed Morrissey. Ed's the head editor there. And so I'm looking forward to talking to Terry. I've never talked to her before. So that's Monday night. And then on Thursday, we'll do Halloween. And I don't know if you want to just like watch this. And then, we do both an audio and visual here, but you're going to want to watch this. Go to Rumble and watch it. And if you want to see all the places you can watch and listen to our show, there's a um, there's a page on our website called Listen. That's at jimandknight.com/listen. God, I'm slurring my words. You think I was a drunk. Any rate, yeah, Terry Christoph on Monday. I hope you guys have a good weekend. I want to thank you very much for listening and watching. Really appreciate it. Good night, Esperanza. Good night, Uncle Donnie. And good night to you, wherever you are. We'll see you on Monday. Take care. Have a nice weekend, everyone.